You've seen the big plays.
Durrant stepping to his right, looking, stopping, firing, end zone, touchdown!
You've heard what the playmakers and coaches have had to say.
Up for a three. Got it!
But now it's time to go behind the mic with BYU sports broadcasters to get their distinctive take on the games.
Oh, what an aggressive play!
This is Behind the Mic with host Cleon Wall.
We're here to bring you unique insights and stories from the BYU sports broadcasters who cover the Cougars and from the Cougars themselves. Let the hype begin.
Touchdown! The Big 12 open for business.
That's the Big 12's hype video releasing the new look conference's football schedule. And BYU fans got their wish. Oklahoma, one of the most successful programs in college football history, is coming to Provo in November. And BYU will play at Texas in late October. Oh, and there are 7 other Big 12 games in 2023. So I invited BYU Sports Nation producer Ben Bagley on to discuss the watchability of each game. My number one game, I initially put Oklahoma, but I'm not going to put Oklahoma. I think the most watchable game potentially on the year is BYU at TCU. It's a good old whack, Mount West Conference foe, so plenty of old-timey storylines if you want to go there. BYU is going to be coming off of a bye to take on a team that was the national runner-up. It's the newness of the Big 12, but really it's kind of worn off because it's not the first game. It's the first really good Big 12 team BYU will play this season. So if both teams do well, this could be a really both teams do well coming into this game. It could be a good game. The only thing that I think is a downside potentially is that TCU just blows out BYU, and that makes this game unwatchable.
I don't think TCU will blow out. Now, I'm saying this in January, and
Correct,
we're
yes.
looking clear ahead to October 14th. so take it with a very large grain of salt. I don't know that you see very many blowouts in the Big 12 from the BYU standpoint, or frankly, look at the schedule otherwise. There wasn't a lot of them last year in the Big 12. This conference is built on the parity of these teams being very good. Not great teams. TCU had a great team this year, but it was kind of a storybook thing. A lot of come from behinds. But there's just a bunch of really good teams in this conference. I think that's what makes it exciting. And I love your pick of TCU. Because of the Mountain West Conference ties, there's history there. And I think history, especially in a sport like college football, has a lot of meaning. That said, they're not my number one team. That's not my number one game.
What?
Although I love it. The number one game, you had it right the first time, and you should have just stuck with it, Cleon. It's Oklahoma. For the first time ever, BYU will host P5 teams in November in meaningful meaningful games is my addition to this, but hosting P5, and it's Oklahoma. Boomer Sooner. And it's here in Provo.
I get it, Ben.
On Senior Day.
I'll tell you. Okay.
Hopefully it's 14 below zero.
I'll tell you why I have a problem with the Oklahoma game. I'll just tell you right now,
Yeah,
and then
go.
I'll rank it later. It's the second to last game of the season. It is Senior Day. I don't know. People might shy away from this game if BYU's really not that good. And I'm talking nationally here. I'm not talking just locally. I think there will be a lot of interest locally. I'm just wondering nationally if this is going to be like, hey, I really want to watch this game. If Oklahoma's good and BYU's kind of average, it still could be something big nationally or vice versa. I'm just not sure we're going to see that from these two teams.
That's a fair point because Oklahoma looked pretty mid last year as well. But if you think about it this way, if it's not national relevant, fine. It may come down to this. BYU's got to get this game to get bowl eligible. All of a sudden, Senior Day is more than just coming to watch Idaho State get the doors beat off of them, having to sit through the whole stinking game so you could cheer the seniors, to where it's actually a game that you want to be at more than just to say goodbye to the seniors. It's a world-class college football game. Number one watchable game. You were wrong.
Wow. Just right off the bat, he just tells me I'm wrong. Okay. Number 2. Here's my number 2. It's Texas. There's a history with BYU. This game will never happen again, kind of like the Oklahoma game that we talked about. Game is never going to happen again, at least as conference foes. Maybe they'll play in a bowl or something like that. Perfect time of year in Austin. It's probably going to be beautiful down there in October. Steve Sarkisian versus his alma mater. That's a great storyline, too. That has to be a clear-cut number 2. I could even make an argument for number 1, but I would say Texas number 2. The only bad thing is Actually, I don't have anything bad to say about this game. I think it's going to be fantastic no matter what.
Yeah, I think this is a clear-cut number 2, and I didn't want to put it that high. I really didn't. One of my biggest concerns, and I get it, BYU fans, the first thing we all looked at when the schedule came out was Texas and Oklahoma. Where are they? Great, we got both of them. Now where are we going and who's coming here? Oh, cool, we got Oklahoma here. Great, we're going to Texas. Love it. We've got great success at Darrell K. Royal Stadium. Yeah, so that's great. But my one concern about putting Oklahoma and Texas as high as I did, 1-2, and I'm guilty of this, does it devalue the conference that we're in when these two are looking to get out the door ASAP? And once they're out the door, does it devalue what is left? Now, I know we're still in that baby stage, toddler stage, where everything is great in the Big 12, but these are questions you need to ask and look down the road. I don't think it's that big of a deal because it is Texas and Oklahoma. Texas is a clear-cut number 2 on this list. They'd be number 1 if they were here in Provo. Maybe we'd have another big storm and a 2-hour delay. But I love the history there. You're right. The Steve Sarkisian thing plays into it. I think it's just a wonderful thing. Besides that, I went to one of those games down in Austin a few years ago, plus 10. It was an amazing atmosphere, and I loved it. Austin was a great town, but maybe even more than that. That's one of 2 trips BYU's making to Texas, which I think will be huge for the Cougars when it comes to recruiting in the Big 12 because you're making trips into Texas probably twice a year at least, and that's great to sell to recruits down there.
Okay, what is your number 3?
Number 3, let me look at my list real quick because it's different than yours. I know that. Number 3 is TCU. This is where TCU comes in.
Okay.
For all the reasons you said, I loved – now, frankly, I like Sonny Dykes, Gary Patterson. I loved that guy. To interview him, to talk to him. My boys, we're going to go hunt. That's what my defense does. We hunt. I was like, Gary Patterson, I'd play for you. No, but I loved that Mountain West relationship. And frankly, the only reason I got TCU this high for this, but this is where I'm going to bring up the biggest miss by the Big 12 schedulers. Baylor had to be on this. You're bringing in a new team in BYU. You want to build tradition, want to build rivalries. BYU Baylor have just played 2 games, split them there, really good games, especially this last one in Provo. You made a big miss, schedulers not doing that for another year and build that rivalry and that momentum going forward to your new Big 12 because you're going to be looking for rivalries. You're going to be looking for games like that, and you had an opportunity to build it there, and you let them off the hook.
Thank you, Dennis Green.
Yes, but no, I love TCU, and I love that at number 3.
Okay, my number 3 is Cincinnati. First Big 12 game in Provo, so I think that's a big thing. It's on a Friday night, so you got Friday night lights. It's great that the first game is against a new conference foe. At least that's my opinion. It might be good to have an older one, but I don't know. I think there's something special there, like BYU's coming in, Cincinnati's coming in. Good first game in the Big 12 for both these teams, at least. I shouldn't say first game, but the first home game, I should say, for BYU. So having their first home game against a new team, I think would be great. I would love it if Cincinnati's in their all blacks for that game and BYU is in their all whites for that game. I think that would just really pop on the TV screen and also at the stadium. I'm not really sure there is a bad, especially since it's a Friday night game and it's so early in the Big 12 conference season. So that was my number 3.
My number 3, my number 4 is going to change a little bit as we move to number 4 here.
Okay.
Is I originally had Texas Tech here, but when I was doing my rankings, I realized I had this game much lower than it needed to be. I originally had it 7. Then if you look at my notes, I scribbled and moved it up to 6. And since I took my notes, I looked at it, I'm like, nope, it's now number 4, and it's Oklahoma State because they're Oklahoma State. It's Mike Gundy. This is the best team in the Big 12 over the past decade. Not Texas, not Oklahoma. Oklahoma State has been the most consistent team year in and year out in the Big 12. And by the way, the Big 12 scheduled that on rivalry weekend. Is this going to be the BYU manufactured rivalry in the Big 12?
No.
Let me have that dream, Cleon, because it would be a great game to have as a rivalry. I think there's a lot to be. I mean, I love what Mike Gundy's done there at Oklahoma State is he's built a program. They're not going to national championship games. They're not having the flashes that Oklahoma's had. They don't have the brand value that Texas had. but it's a great program, and you know you're going to face a great team every time you face Oklahoma State. So I slid that at originally 7. I'm jumping it all the way up to number 4 on my list.
Okay. Just to let everyone know, my number 4 was actually the Oklahoma game. I don't think I need to add anything to what Ben said. I think it's going to be a huge game, big-time atmosphere. As I said before, the only thing that worries me is that one of those two teams may not be good. My number 5 was OSU, Oklahoma State. I agree. It's a team that's really kind of been like that, maybe not the name, but the standard bearer of that conference. They are always good. Last season was kind of weird at the end of the season, but in reality, Mike Gundy they always have a good program. They just can't quite win that conference championship or whatever, but they always have a good program. You know, and he's got the mullet. I mean, how do you not like seeing that on TV or maybe even in person if you're able to go there? Maybe BYU's fighting for a New Year's Six Bowl or a bigger bowl game by the time we get to this game, but it's the last. The thing that worries me about this game is it's the last game of the season. BYU may be fighting for a bowl or not. Could just be another college football game on Thanksgiving weekend. It may just not have the cachet that at least in January, February that we're talking about, it may not, by the time we get there, it may be just like, it's not quite as good as we hoped it would be.
But the other part, though, and this is something that's interesting, I think that sports fans we get behind because it's the professional wrestling mentality of you need to have heroes and you need to have hills. You need to have faces and hills. Mike Gundy's a great hill. Like,
yes.
He's the guy that you want to cheer against. He's that, I don't like that guy. I hope his team loses. That brings a different dynamic to that, which I think BYU fans will kind of grasp onto and really like. It's okay to not like a guy and cheer against him. Let's go. Come on.
All right. So that was my number 5. That was your number 4. What's your number 5, Ben?
My number 5 is Kansas. And that's because it is the first Big 12 game. Normally, and I think last year I enjoyed watching Kansas start with their streak of hot games at the first of the year where they're national relevant, and then all of a sudden they just remember that they were Kansas, and they didn't finish as strong. But hey, they better than we thought they were going to be, which makes that interesting. Are they going to be able to do that again next year? So I think, granted, again, January talking about September and October, but is Kansas going to be the Kansas that was in the first 4 games last season? Are they going to remember that they're Kansas? They need to wait till basketball season to be relevant. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to start your Big 12 entrance, which is that Kansas game where there's unknowns, but you don't want them to be the ones that just spoils that first game party.
Why don't you go with your number 6, too?
Number 6. Okay, this is where I got to do some math because I slid things around. So my 6 is actually my 7, which is Cincinnati.
Okay.
Which Cincinnati, by the way, everything you were right in that. There are brothers. Like, we're coming in with Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF. I feel like there's a more of a tie, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just me with Cincinnati than there is with Houston and with UCF, who's just out there on the other side of the country. Not that Ohio and Cincinnati is really closer than Houston. It just feels closer. I failed geography, by the way. It feels closer, and it's part. I just feel like there's more kinship there with that team than there is the others. So it's kind of an interesting. And it's the first home game, and there's the excitement, the pomp, the circumstance that's going to go into that game, the first Big 12 game ever at LaVell Edwards Stadium. Jets flying over, marching bands, and all that other good stuff. Oh, now, how many days till that?
Yeah, it's a few weeks away. My number 6 is Kansas. BYU, it's their first Big 12 game. I think that's a reason to rejoice if you're thinking about this as a big game. They could be 3-0 heading into this game. Could be 3-0 heading into this game. I think they have a good chance of actually winning this game too, which is a big deal. The problem is it's just what you said. It's Kansas. They played better last year, but it's still Kansas. And if they don't beat Missouri State, Illinois, and Nevada in their first 3 games, I don't think many people are really going to be interested in BYU and Kansas other than maybe the BYU fans because it is the first Big 12 game. I'll go to my number 7. My number 7 is Texas Tech. BYU will be back home for that game. They could be 3-0 in conference if they upset TCU. That's maybe a little bit of a wish. If not, it's the second home game in the Big 12 with a team they're going to fight with year in and year out, probably right in the middle of the pack. That's usually where Texas Tech is right in the middle of the pack. Tech will have faced Baylor and Kansas State the previous 2 weeks, so they'll be battle-tested. It could be a sneaky good game to watch if both teams are on top of their game. It could be bad if neither team is on top of their game, and this is just another conference game in the middle of the season.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Tech. That's right there where I've got them slotted in. I want to get excited for that game. I want there to be Tech had this nice little run where they became relevant with Mike Leach, and they actually kept it going for a minute. But now they've just kind of taken that step back, and they're looking for an identity in who they are and what they're going to be. I think the new Big 12 will help them establish that identity. I think Texas and Oklahoma leaving actually helps a team like Texas Tech in the conference and the standings and what they can be in the conference. But it's that perfect middle of the road game, and that's where it's ranked for both of us. It looks like.
Okay, your number 8.
Number 8, good old West Virginia.
I have West Virginia
Mountain
too.
Home, take me. No, that's I'm mixing songs here.
Take me home, country road.
It is same
to
song.
The place I belong.
John Denver, Brad Paisley, whoever sings it, it's still a really, really good song. This one should. I think maybe you and I missed on this, and it should be just a little bit higher. Because BYU played West Virginia, what was it, 4 years ago?
2016, actually.
5 years? 6 years ago? Yeah. Jeez, that's a long time ago.
2016.
And I remember that game being just fun to watch.
Yes,
it was. It was a battle. Now, granted, Coach Dana's in Houston now, not in West Virginia, but it was still a really fun game. It's just that so far, that's going to be one thing that's going to be interesting to see how this new conference overcomes the geography of distance. They will. And once we get into it, it's going to be, hey, no, that's our conference foe. But for the time being and getting used to it, UCF, West Virginia, they're way out there. And so it's kind of hard to have that rivalry or that desire of thinking, hey, this is a game I really am up for.
The only thing I would say that I'm looking forward to in this game is the fact that, Keaton Slovis played at Pittsburgh last year and had some interesting things to say about West Virginia. I think that's probably the most interesting thing. I think at this point of the season, BYU could be struggling for notoriety if we're going to get there. I'm interested in the game because I'm a BYU fan. I don't know how much people will be really interested in it unless somehow BYU and West Virginia are nationally relevant at that point. You know, it is the game after BYU plays Texas. That's the other thing that I'm just wondering, how's BYU going to be in that game? I don't know. Anyway, so moving on to finally our number 9, which I think – I'm sorry.
I'm going to call it 20 here real quick. 20-second timeout.
20-second timeout.
Because you just brought up something that's interesting. You don't know how BYU is going to be after they play Texas. Welcome to a Power 5 conference.
Exactly.
There's always the game after the game where beforehand in Independence you'd get up for a big game, then you'd have a Mountain West team or a WAC team or a Division II team, whatever, the following week. So there's kind of that thing. You don't get that chance now. You get your first 3 weeks, and after that it's the game after the game after the game after the game, which will be an interesting storyline throughout the season for BYU to see how they adjust to that.
Yeah, no, it will be. Number 9, I think we have the same team.
We do. Ames, anyone?
Iowa State coming here to Provo.
I hope they bring the tap water. They say the tap water in Ames is the best.
My only note on this was, is BYU going to be awesome when they get to this game? Probably not. Hopefully good. Is Iowa State going to be awesome? Probably not. I just don't see people nationwide really being interested in this game. It just feels kind of like a conference game of 2 unranked opponents where their fan bases are going to be the only ones who are really, really, really interested in this game. So maybe something will change, but that's pretty much the only reason. That's why they're number 9 on my list, I should say.
Be careful now. Don't sleep on the Cyclones. We've seen them in the last couple years. Now, not great. Frankly, good.
Yes.
But they have been good. And frankly, they are what BYU fans, if they want to be honest with themselves for a second, hope BYU can be in the Big 12. A team that's above middle, not really dipping below the middle, and occasionally can jump up and have that season where they're battling for a championship. I think that's what BYU fans would want and accept, and that's what Iowa State is. That said, I still have them as that last game.
I love the fact that Oklahoma's coming here. I mean, that was kind of the number 1 on my wish list. I wanted to have Oklahoma visit Lavelle Edwards, and and they're coming. So, I mean, I couldn't be happier.
BYU basketball analyst Mark Durrant is excited for the football season, but he's still focused on this current edition of the basketball Cougars.
Mahaney with 5 and with 4. Mahaney will drive, stop, fade away, score with .3.
Durrant told me it could be difficult for this team to turn things around and be consistently good after devastating defeats to Gonzaga and St. Mary's.
I mean, you think about where BYU's at right now. They've had essentially 3 weeks of misery. You know, you did have one win in there at home against Pepperdine, but you had just a total and utter gut punch in a game you had sewn up against Gonzaga, you know, a top 10 team on your home floor. That will shake a team. And I think it did really affect BYU, notwithstanding that they beat Pepperdine at home. I think it carried over onto those road games where BYU just didn't seem quite like themselves, didn't rebound particularly well, and didn't play great defense, and lost those road games. And now you've lost this game to St. Mary's, where you did play well. You did everything right. You played hard. You out-rebounded St. Mary's, which is amazing. And you had that game and have that lose. So it's been 3 weeks of heartbreak, disappointment. And when you lose, everybody's miserable. Coaches are mad and miserable. The players are miserable, and they've had to do that for like 3 weeks. And that puts a lot of pressure, Cleon, on teams. And, you know, I don't know much about what went on, but you had the 3 players that broke a team rule and were out against St. Mary's. And I just, the hope is that you can, with that kind of pressure, to keep your guys together, keep them believing, and really focus on the fact that, listen, we're a gnat's eyelash from beating 2 top 20 teams on our home floor in these last few weeks. It didn't go our way, but we're in these games. We're in every game we play. Let's just focus on just making the right plays at the end. It's not like there's a gap, this huge gulf that we need to cross to be as good as these teams we're playing. We just need to make sure we're together and playing the right kind of ball, especially late in the game, and not turning the ball over and making our free throws. And we're right where we need to be. You just got to keep pounding that home that I know it's tough right now. I know it's tough, but we're right there. We just need to get a little better, and let's finish this thing strong. But that's a real challenge after 3 weeks of real disappointment.
I thought BYU played good defense coming up until like that Pepperdine. The second half of that Pepperdine game, they gave up quite a few points in the second half, but they also scored quite a few points. And then it was like the next 3 games, they give up over 80 points in those next 3 games. But then St. Mary's does play a little bit slower, but they did hold St. Mary's to the 50s. Encouraged at all by BYU getting back to maybe their defensive ways?
Yeah, absolutely. Those 3 games, even though BYU beat Pepperdine, with the Santa Clara and San Francisco games, I was really disappointed. I thought BYU took some significant steps backwards, because you got to remember, in that Gonzaga game, they were terrific. I mean, they played a great game, and before that had won a bunch of games, and were in a good position. And again, that Gonzaga punch, I mean, that puts you on your heels and your legs are wobbling. And like I said, even though they beat Pepperdine, it wasn't particularly impressive, and they just didn't have it on the road. And, this team is not good enough offensively. They don't have the firepower offensively to just beat teams by scoring baskets. They rely on just really good defense, really energetic, and rebounding. I mean, rebounding is so hard to do. And for them to rebound like they did against St. Mary's, it just shows a ferocious effort on the boards. And that has really been what has saved BYU this year, and what has won games for them is defense and rebounding. It not necessarily been scoring the basketball. And so when they went on that road trip and didn't play good defense, didn't rebound well like they should, I mean, it wasn't a surprise that they lost. And so they were definitely taking some steps backwards. I thought the coaching staff and the team did a nice job of refocusing on defense and rebounding, and did a heck of a job against St. Mary's, which is, again, why it's particularly heartbreaking to lose that game, because they did almost everything right, and they still lost that game. But That's got to be the formula for them. If they want to have success, if they want to win games, it's going to start with their defense and rebounding. They just don't have quite the offensive tools they do to just beat teams scoring baskets. And so you're going to be in most games because of your defense and rebounding. You're going to be in close games because of your defense and rebounding, and you're not going to run away from teams. So you've got to find ways to really tighten up these last couple minutes, not make turnovers, make your free throws, and just a few small things can make all the difference in your season. As we've seen these last few weeks, a couple of bounces here and there, a couple of things go your way, and all of a sudden you've beaten two really good teams on your home floor. And maybe the Bay Area trip is a little different because you have that confidence, you have that momentum, and you're right where you want to be. But that's the way basketball is. You can't say what if. You just have to go play the next game and realize the good things you're doing and try and correct some of those mistakes. And again, recognizing that this is a good basketball team. We can win against really good teams if we just play hard defense, rebound, and make the plays at the end.
Who is this team's leader right now, Mark? I mean, who can you tell when they get on the floor that they have control of the situation and they kind of command the respect from the other players? Does BYU have that? Who is that guy?
I don't think they have it, Cleon, just to be frank with you. I think there's certainly guys at times that do that and are capable of doing it, but there hasn't been a consistent leader. And I think that's kind of been the problem with this team, the lack of consistency. I think Spencer Johnson's probably as close as you come to that. And he's a great defender and really reliable. But, he's not, a superstar guy like Alex Barcelo or Travis Hansen, or go down the list. Every year you have kind of one guy or two guys that are really, really kind of your go-to guys that are unquestionably the leaders of the team. The problem with, I think, for BYU this year is it's been a kind of a different guy at different times. Rudy played really well on the road, but against San Francisco and Santa Clara, and Dallin played really good the other night. One night it's Spencer Johnson, one night it's Foose, and it's not bad that you have different guys stepping up to make have big games, but I really think it's important to kind of have that strong leader, go-to guy on a team. And I think there's certainly guys that can develop into that. I think Dallin Hall is a guy that can develop into that, but it's just not quite where it needs to be for this team, and I think it shows at times on the floor.
I do want to talk about Dallin Hall really quickly. Even though he missed that free throw in the St. Mary's game, I've been impressed with him. Not all of his games have been great, but I guess I've been impressed because, it's his first year of college basketball. He hasn't played competitive basketball for a few years, because he went on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I've been actually really impressed with him this year. What have your thoughts been about Dallin?
My thoughts about Dallin are that he is kind of a pure basketball player, and I really like that about him. I think he's tough-minded, which is evidenced by how hard he plays and the big shots he has hit this season. He's won a couple games for BYU, and I just can't express how different it is going from high school to college, and then you throw in a 2-year mission. I mean, it's crazy that he's able to perform at the level he has. I mean, I think physically, missions, you can overcome the kind of the physical part of it and be ready to play, but there's just no way to minimize the kind of, I call it basketball rust, just not playing consistently for 2 years. Even though the physical skills come back, just the feel and the knowledge and how you move, it just takes a while to shake off that rust. So for him to be performing at the level he has is terrific. And, I'm not worried about free throws. He's struggling this year. He'll get better. I mean, earlier in the year, he was struggling from three. Now he's very consistent from three. Earlier in the year, he was having turnovers problems, and he's had a couple of those games recently, but the other night he was perfect on the turnovers and he's big, he's strong. He's bigger than most point guards and stronger, and he has a good ability to get in the paint, and he's a good post player in the paint against smaller guards. And so, I mean, listen, the sky is the limit for Cordell, and he's terrific. I'm not worried about a missed free throw. I mean, obviously you'd like to see those go in, and but he'll get better, and he's every weakness that I've seen, he's getting better at, and the strengths are really impressive.
That's Mark Durrant. Coming up next, Riley Nelson bids farewell to the broadcast booth. Welcome back to Behind the Mic.
They adjusted same formation. It was the same thing every time, except this time they kept 5 players in the box, so it's 5-on-5.
Riley Nelson has been BYU football's radio analyst for the past 4 seasons. It's a job he campaigned for once his playing career for the Cougars was finished. But now he's decided to hang up the microphone. So what's changed in 4 years?
Number of kids. So 4 years ago, so family situation is different. I had a 6-month-old son when I took the job 4 years ago, and now we'll have our first born here in about a month, our fourth born here in about a month. And my wife, she handles the house and she can manage the trips and things like that. Is it ideal? No. I mean, obviously it's best to have, 2 parents there, a helping hand, especially, and that bleeds into kind of the second, professionally. I work as an employee benefits consultant for a firm called GBS out of Salt Lake City. And the nature of our business is I bring on, as I grow my clientele, that book of business becomes larger and demands kind of more and more of your time and resources, including for me, as I've secured business outside of state, it requires some travel. And as luck would have it, travel that's primarily concentrated in the fourth quarter, right? Or the last 3 months of the year, which of course coincides with college football season. So, so there was, and it happened multiple times this week. I'd have to be on a plane throughout the week once or twice for work. And then I'd get home Thursday night and turn around and have to fly out Friday for a game. And that's just, again, it was manageable, but not ideal. And then, callings come and go for all of us, and those have varying time demands for each of us. And so that was a consideration as well. And so as I looked at it and the amount of time that I was getting to spend with my kids, the amount of time that I needed to dedicate to my professional life, and then the amount of time I needed to dedicate to serve diligently in the church calling, all those things just continue to put pressure. And it was, like I said, I've said again, it was manageable, but not ideal. And I felt strongly that I had to let the pressure out somewhere. And I swear to you, Cleon, I looked everywhere else. I didn't start with my gig to be alongside the booth with Greg Wrubell, with my gig as the radio analyst. But the more and more I mulled it over and thought about, how can I do this or how can I do that? And unfortunately, it kept coming back that unfortunately for me, the thing that probably had to give, or at least made the most sense to give, was my role alongside Greg in the radio booth on Saturdays.
What was the hardest decision about deciding to step down? Because as we mentioned earlier, this is something that you wanted to do and that you're now really good at. And so what was the hardest decision in deciding to step down?
Yeah, I mean, you name it. Being part of game day, I still got that little bit of buzz, right? Us former players, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us are junkies for it, right? And being a fan, just being in their stands, you don't get that same taste. But knowing that I had to perform, granted, I wasn't strapping on a helmet and going out and executing an offense, but I still had to, be on it and the prep and all those things. So game day and the game day atmosphere. I mean, the way for me to transfer my experience as a player into a different medium, this time being the media. And the broadcast, that's probably what I'll miss most. But right up there alongside with it is the engagement with Cougar Nation. I said this in my tweet thread that I announced it, is I thought I had a feel for Cougar Nation and their passion and their dedication to especially BYU football. But man, that changed after 4 years of 8:30 kicks and doing Cougar Nation now to 2 and 3 in the morning. And when we're having discussions or soliciting trivia, answers or questions to discuss on our post-game show, and there are literally dozens flooding in a minute, it gives you a new appreciation for the lengths that which BYU fans will go to support their team. And so that engagement with Cougar Nation obviously will be different and won't ever look the same. And then lastly, I formed very good friendships, obviously with Greg and Mitch, but then also Jason in the pregame and Ben Bagley in the pregame. But then, all the guys that Greg thanks, McKay and Ralph and Barry and Michael, that's a mixture of spotters, statisticians, engineers, all the crew that work to make that broadcast such a special thing. The camaraderie and friendships and relationships with those guys. I'm not going to be able to see them that much because I didn't see them in my day-to-day, but look forward to seeing them on game day. And now on game days, I'll still be there and around the stadium, but those guys are going to be wired in, working, continuing to produce the wonderful broadcast that we've all become accustomed to.
How have fans taken the news? You mentioned that you feel like each year you've kind of gotten a little bit, or at least this is how I read it, you've gotten a little bit better at knowing what Cougar fans want and how much they love their team. How have they taken the news that you're like, yeah, it's been a great 4 years, but I'm taking off?
Yeah, it's been an outpouring of support. A lot of them have expressed, whether genuine or not, but I do think most of it's genuine. They've expressed disappointment. A lot of them, were very complimentary of the work of the product that I put into on Saturday, which for me was very nice because I did put work into my craft. Not to mention just preparing week in to week out, but I also took the time to meet with BYU coaches and players and try and get their perspective, not so much to overtly just divulge that over the broadcast, but rather to inform my analysis and inform my commentary. And so, I took time voluntarily out of my schedule in spring and throughout the summer and in fall camp to to educate on my team and to be able to be as meaningful, to bring as much meaningful contribution to the broadcast as I could. So it's been overwhelmingly positive. It makes it even tougher to step away, but unfortunately, it was something that had to be done. And I'm just holding out hope. I don't know what this looks like. It probably doesn't. These opportunities don't come around very often, and the circumstances around it. But I hold out some hope in the future that I can be involved in some way. Maybe when the circumstances of life look a little bit different in the future.
Kind of sounds like there's a tiny bit of fear that you may not be able to get back in. I know there are other more important things out there that you could say, oh, well, I've still got this, and this, but maybe a little bit like, oh, if I get out now, am I going to be able to get back in again?
Oh, Cleon, it's not fear. I've accepted that as a reality, and that's probably part of what weighs on my discouragement or my sadness is to be able to get back in there. It's not looking likely. We got a bunch of young kids. We got 4 kids. Our oldest is 5. We're not done yet. And, that family planning. So that puts us so I know that family situation, like we're not going to be out of diapers for another 4 or 5 years, Now I've heard it does get easier from others that as the oldest gets older and they can help out a little bit, but we're in the thick of that. So I look forward, and then so if it's another 4 or 5 years, at least from raising little ones, then I look on the other side of that. And the further and further you get out in the timeline, obviously it just gets harder and harder to predict. So I've given up I've accepted the fact that it's a virtual impossibility that I ever get to retake the role that I did. But Cleon, I'll just be open with you. Like I've hoped that hey, maybe there could be something that I could have, a spot in the pregame show and help out there or help co-host, or maybe there's a postgame or this or that. And all these, I know they're just ideas that are hopeful ideas and wishful thinking for me to hold on to be able to be engaged in some form or another. And look, if I'm not engaged as part of the media or part of the broadcast crew or anything, that's okay. I still get to be very involved as an alumni. Everybody knows how much Coach Sitake reaches out to the alumni and allows them to be involved and encourages us to be involved. And I fully plan on embracing those opportunities and just taking my family as a fan. I mean, that's enough support and opportunity to stay engaged as really one needs.
So what's next for you football-wise? It sounds like you're still going to be a fan and potentially come down to games down at Edwards Stadium.
Yeah, well, I don't get a free ticket in the form of a media pass every week, so I got to call down there. And I am a member of the Cougar Club, even though I haven't had tickets, so I got to see what getting some tickets looks like. And we'll take, so we'll buy some season tickets there and to, continue to take my family down to as many games as makes sense and do that. And that's about it. I mean, my kids are still, like I said, the oldest is only 5. He turns 6 in October. So football is still not in his cards. So, but it's just raising them, getting them through school and their sports. They still do other stuff in the fall. There's fall soccer leagues, and my boys are into wrestling, and and getting into some other stuff. So I'll be supporting them in their different pursuits. But football specifically, yeah, it's just being there in Lavelle Edwards Stadium on game day with my family and watching the Cougars every Saturday and cheering on from the sidelines.
Are you going to be breaking down plays for your kids and your wife if you watch games at home?
Yeah, Cleon, I got to tell you, that was a big thing. So I go boy, boy, girl, boy. So this newest one that'll be here in about a month is another boy. So I have 2 boys and a girl right now. But my oldest boys, who are 5 and 3, they're especially the 5-year-old. Like, he's starting to get it, and he's starting to ask questions. But he's never been to a game with his daddy, right? So I make the joke. I'm like, I can't have my boy getting baptized and not knowing the difference between what a left guard does and a will linebacker. You know, he needs to know those differences. He needs to know that when a quarterback has a 3rd down and 8 and is in field goal range, that he absolutely can't take a sack in that scenario because he's giving up 3 points. He needs to find a way to either, get positive yards with his feet or throw the ball out of bounds. All of those things need to be well ingrained, at least by the time that he's baptized, in my mind. And as good as a trooper his mom is to take him to the games, she didn't grow up necessarily in a football family. They were all volleyball, basketball players. And so she's great about making sure everybody's well fed and has got their Cougar tails and their soda. But she lacks a little bit of the institutional knowledge that you need to train up the boys in the way that they deserve to be trained up. So yes, whether it's in the stands or at home, you can bet that there's going to be plenty of education, football education going on with the Nelsons.
I'm wondering, after spending some time at home this fall, I know she'll appreciate having you in the home and being with the kids. But if you get into too much breakdown of plays, I'm wondering if she's going to say, maybe you should just go back to the stadium and call the game there.
Yeah, except she's been tuning me out for 10 years and somehow still manages. So she's pretty good at that.
What's been your favorite game that you broadcast? And this could be anything, like maybe it's how you called the game, or maybe it's how the game turned out. What's been your favorite game in your 4 years that you're like, yeah, that's the one that I just look back and I just have fond memories of it?
That's a great question. I got to tell you, Cleon, it's not a specific game, but like going to Myrtle Beach or going to Lynchburg, Virginia, or I don't even remember the town in Georgia where Georgia Southern was. Because for me, I grew up small town, right? Logan, Utah State at the time was in the Big West when I was coming up, and then they went independent and, kind of small. And so it was great for me to go across the country and see that in these small towns, like, it's not, college football is not just Michigan and Ohio State or Alabama and Auburn or, Georgia and Florida. Like, college football permeates almost every community at some level, right? Whether it's Division I or FCS or Division II or III, it touches almost every community across our country. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Obviously, for me, it was such a big part of my upbringing, and then I got to the great fortune of being lucky enough to play it in some of the biggest and most prestigious venues across the country. But to also, like, those games were very memorable to me because it brought back, like, this is college football in its purest form. This isn't primetime ESPN with Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler on the call. These people are here because they want to support their local community. There's youth running around with jerseys who idolize these players who, when their college careers end, nobody else is going to remember them but these 8 and 9-year-olds that are playing their own game of football up on the concourse of the stadium. So those are very memorable moments, and those are the ones that I hold most fond because maybe I've kind of romanticized them due to my own upbringing. But if you ask me for a singular game, for me, it comes down to a couple. As a player, I was there at the beginning of the streak, meaning I was a backup to Max Hall in 2009, the last time that we had beaten Utah. Unfortunately, I then proceeded, 2 games I was on the sideline for, but then the rest of my 3 years, we were unable to get the job done against Utah. Sometimes in very close fashion, like my sophomore and my senior year, and sometimes in ugly fashion, like my junior year, which was 54-10. but anyway, I got to be part of the streak ending. So the Cougars taking care of business against Utah and breaking that long drought to get back on the winning track against our rivals was a very memorable moment. And then second to that is, for me, I grew up I was in middle school, high school when USC was having their big time run in the early 2000s. And so that was like the biggest national brand for me. Reggie Bush, Lendell White, Pete Carroll, Matt Leinart, Mike Williams, like Troy Polamalu, all these different players, right? And so USC has always been like that huge brand for me. And so when the game against LaVell Edwards Stadium that went into overtime, obviously Peyton Wilgar secured the victory with a pick in that 2019 season, was one of the more memorable ones too. But I know we got time, and I've already rambled on long enough. If you want my complete list, my memory still serves like it did as a player. I can probably go down most every game for you and recall how it went and some details and some plays that went good and not so good. So we'll have to save that for another time.
A big thanks again to Riley Nelson, Mark Durrant, and Ben Bagley. Download and subscribe to Behind the Mic wherever you find podcasts, or listen to all episodes on the BYU Radio app. Behind the Mic is a production of BYU Radio.